The Nvidia rally just keeps on going. We just ticked in the last 10 minutes to a fresh new high, and chip makers as a sector are now up more than 7%. Let's continue the conversation about what we've learned from this epic day. Ben Bajarin is the CEO and principal analyst at Creative Strategies. Ben, welcome back to the show. Quite a session we got. What do you think?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, obviously a super clean quarter. I think a huge amount of questions were on what the reaction was going to be. There was a lot of really positives. I think if anything, coming away right from a big picture, it seems like demand remains really strong. Seems like Nvidia is going to remain supply constrained throughout the year. They're on a really good product cycle in terms of cadence, with new products now coming out again this year. I think that again increases demand. And the number for me that was interesting was 40%, they said, was relative to inference dollars, which there's been a huge debate within the industry about how well positioned GPUs are for what comes after training, which is the market that we're in right now related to AI, and that's inference. And people want to start inferencing these large language models. There's been a huge question as to the role of GPUs. So given that people are buying those for inference, is another positive sign for a real long run for Nvidia.
The numbers, what impressed you the most here? Just the general sales growth, margins, outlook. What here is, you think, the real breadwinner?
Yeah, I mean, margins were crazy. I mean, you don't normally see that of a semiconductor company that are usually in the 50s. I think that was really, really impressive, sort of unprecedented for the space. I think the guide, again, right, not just this next quarter, but really just where the long term goes, it seems like this growth is not slowing down. The question is not going to be, doesn't Nvidia continue to grow over quarter? It's really going to be how much, right, over quarter and year over year. So I think the comments around remaining relatively supply constrained, the demands remaining significantly strong, is a great long-term outlook for NVIDIA.
Okay. So coming back to that point, inference versus the GPUs and what to use them for. Come back to that, because I think there's an important point there about like the competitive aspects and how NVIDIA it doesn't seem like they're losing any ground on any utility of chips.
Yeah, I think that's, again, the meta point around this is just what happens when we move away from training, which is an incredibly compute intensive environment that we're in with AI, and what happens when we go to inference. And so that's been the real big question, right? You've got AMD well positioned with inference. These can happen on CPUs. These can happen with dedicated accelerators, the likes that Amazon is making for AWS. Microsoft's making these for Azure. Google has these in their data centers as well. They're custom products designed for inference to some degree, training, but really inference. But NVIDIA's dominance in training, it just can't be understated. The question really comes to what happens after that. Will GPUs be used in inference? Are they the most economical, the most performant, the most energy savings when it comes to that aspect? That's a big debate. But I think the fact that this is happening, that they're selling these things for inference is definitely a big deal.
Okay. You were at the Intel Foundry event. What do you make of their approach, and how does it compare when we look to NVIDIA's competitors? I mean, the halo effect here is visible in the chip-making group as a whole. That's one of the things I've had some trouble with. Does it make sense that everybody rallies with them? Or are these numbers from NVIDIA telling us that they dominate, and maybe we shouldn't be having like one-to-one market cap increases with their peers?
Yeah, I think it's a great point to really look at, because, again, the market that we're in right now relative to NVIDIA is they are just the dominant player when it comes to AI and AI training. And how long that market lasts, is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it longer? You mentioned the Intel event. Sam Altman was there, and at the end, there was a Q&A between him and Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger. And I think his comments really set the stage that we're in the very, very early stages of AI, where they want to go with OpenAI, and where I think the AI machine learning community wants to go, demands significantly more compute over the long arc of time, which I think just, again, puts more and more stress on the importance of GPUs. But not everybody is in that cycle with NVIDIA, right? I think you have training in that AMD wants to do. Intel's slightly there from a product standpoint. But I think the big question comes to when those dollars move to inference, it will get more competitive. But this is a TAM expansion, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of semiconductor companies benefit from this. There is a lot more money coming into buying and building out new infrastructure. on the Nvidia call yesterday, right? Jensen has moved his number up from infrastructure refresh from $1 trillion to $2 trillion of dollars that need to get refreshed, rebought in data center infrastructure. There's a ton of money there, and it's not all going to go to Nvidia. The question is, who else will benefit from that lift? And there's only a couple winners in that environment that we're seeing.
All right, love the details. I'm curious if you've heard at all any of the commentary around NVIDIA's bookings from sales at its venture companies. They've got these investments into a lot of businesses that are then buying their chips, and one of the concerns I could see rising is that if NVIDIA's got an investment in a company that's buying their chips, that it creates sort of price insensitive demand. Is there any truth to any of this? Have you thought about any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, there's a couple of things, right? NVIDIA wants to sell a complete solution. As much as we talk about them as a semiconductor company, you could really think of them like a platform company that also sells software, a whole host of services. Chips are a part of that story, and so there's a platform play. Clearly, they want to sell networking components. They want to sell everything, soup to nuts throughout infrastructure. Obviously, some of the companies that they're investing in might do that more than others because NVIDIA is giving them, or they're buying all of those products from InfiniBand to others. But it goes way beyond that. That's a very small percentage of where they're seeing their lift in data center. I think this main point is it doesn't matter if those companies or if it's Microsoft with Azure, AWS with Amazon, Google on-prem of the Fortune 500 or even much larger companies drastically needing to buy new hardware for AI. That's the big lift. So everybody's going to spend money on semi-components and infrastructure. And so again, it's beyond just who's NVIDIA is investing in. There's so much more going on that's going into the supply constraints that they're seeing.
Okay. And price action wise, what do you think's possible here as we break out? I mean, it seems like the charts are telling us not to worry. Is there anything, any level, any price that seems fair that we should be taking profits?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me, studying semiconductor stocks for a long time, this is the first time I think we've seen so many non-institutions, traditional institutions get into a stock. So obviously a lot of retail investors and normal traders coming into this. We don't normally see that, which makes for a little bit more volatility because again, you don't just have expectations of people who are just looking at the historical fundamentals of a semiconductor company, but are beyond that. My biggest concern broadly with this sector is that there is outsized expectations, meaning that people think these companies may grow more than they will when we really are up against manufacturing constraints, right? NVIDIA could do better if they could get more supply. So could AMD. So could other companies, right? They're supply constraining capacity from the TSMCs of the world. And that creates this issue of regardless of demand, they can only get so much supply. And so my concern is that we get to inflated expectations. I have no doubt these companies will continue to grow. Year over year revenue numbers will look really good. But the question is, will they grow enough to satisfy these different classes of investors? And that's a harder question to answer because we've not seen this dynamic in semis before like we're seeing now.
All right. Good analysis. Interesting perspective. Thank you, Ben, very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Ben Bajarin, Creative Strategies. All right, with some good details and a few other notes on the NVIDIA earnings.